Okay, hello. This is Madison Wagner. I'm recording my podcast for POS 315, the American Presidency. I'm doing this podcast on Jimmy Carter to talk about his time as president and some of the things he went through during his presidency. So I'm just going to jump right on into it. Jimmy Carter was born in 1924 in the southern state of Georgia. He served as a naval officer for 7 years, and after that was elected as the state senator in Georgia. And after his work as a senator, he was actually elected as the governor of Georgia. During his time as governor, he really advocated for the end of racial discrimination, which was really important, especially in a southern state like his. After the governing position, he ran as president in 1974, where he was really surprisingly welcomed by the Democratic Party, even though he was a relatively new face to everyone. And since there were some political scandals happening with pre-existing politicians in this sphere, like dealing with the Vietnam War arguably poorly and Nixon's Watergate controversy happening a few years prior, he was really favored and eventually became the 39th president after winning. And he served from 1977 to 1981. And I think the American public really enjoyed having a new face to root for instead of a previous face who let them down and had the wartime reputation following them. Carter was quite successful as a president. He helped with the economy, fixing inflation issues, lowering unemployment percentages, and he actually increased jobs by about 8 million people during his time. He also helped with raising the national GDP during these hard times with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, which was super important. And while Carter was not the president during the Vietnam War, he did have to inherit the United States during the aftermath of the war, which can be an incredibly difficult task to deal with as a president. And he really had to figure out how to make the majority of Americans happy. One of the things that Carter did as soon as he was inaugurated on his first day of inauguration was granting pardons to thousands of men who avoided being drafted during the Vietnam War, either by leaving the country fully or not registering with the Selective Service Team, which all boys had to do within a month of turning 18. I believe it was 100,000 people left the country to go abroad during the time of the Vietnam War so that they could make sure that they wouldn't have to fight in the war. And on top of that, thousands of people went into hiding in the United States too, with some people even fully changing their identities and names. Carter ran on a campaign promise that he would grant pardons to these people, anyone who avoided getting drafted, which was technically an illegal act at the time, especially because the Vietnam War was such a pressing and serious issue in the country. It was pretty controversial for this many people to avoid it. But he claimed that, pardoning these men for their past actions to avoid the draft was something that was really necessary for the country to move on from for the Vietnam War and, move forward together as a country. He didn't want the American people to be stuck in the past on this issue when so many people were feeling the loss and, the tragic aftermaths from this war. It was definitely something he wanted to keep within a previous presidency instead of his own, which I can't blame him for. And I think that was a pretty good decision on his behalf. And I think it helped with his approval ratings, especially as time went on. Over 200,000 men were accused of violating these draft laws, and I think forgiving these men really helped with his presidency and moving forward as a country past the war like he wanted. Carter sadly passed away less than a year ago in December of 2024, but he's actually now the longest living president. He made it to his 100th birthday, which is a huge accomplishment and something I believe he'll be remembered for a long time if someone, doesn't beat his age. Just because I know that a lot of people did talk about this during his last days. But overall, I think Carter was a pretty strong president and definitely gave the country what they needed during the time period that he was president. After dealing with the Vietnam War and Watergate, Americans really needed someone that could step up and be an unproblematic person that helped the country get back on their feet, which I think he did to the best of his ability. I found a poll on CBS News about his approval ratings from 1981 compared to his from 2021. And it says that in 1981, 44% approved of him and 44% disapproved. And in 2021, 44% approved, so it stayed the same, and 25% disapproved, so this dropped by 20%. This is also another poll taken in 2021 about the people's opinion on Carter, looking back at his job as president, and 42% were favorable of him, while only 17% were unfavorable. And 40% were undecided on how they would keep their opinions on him. But I think it definitely says something that his unfavorable percentage is a lot lower than the favorable. Meaning that his actions as president haven't aged badly, like spoiled milk, unlike some presidents, and instead it's aging more like cheese or something. That was a bad analogy, I'm sorry. But a fun fact about President Carter is that I actually met him when I was younger because one of my cousins worked on his Secret Service team pretty high up. He was doing a book signing in Arizona, and my family all got to go and meet him before the event in the back of the bookstore. My dad and brother are also both named James, who go by Jimmy, and I remember him telling them that they had great names. For what it's worth, I remember him being very friendly and nice to all of us, which I think a lot of people are remembering him by after his death as well. But yeah, overall, I think he was a pretty favorable president, especially now. I feel like I don't see a huge amount of people speaking poorly about him. I think he did his best with what he was handed down from previous presidents and really worked to make sure that the country could flourish as a united nation in the future too.